my shoulder point and where the actual shoulder seam went. Shoulder seam. She sells seashells by the seashore. Okay, I did it. Because I'm not a doctor. I'm a geologist. All right, that took too long, I think. Hello all, and welcome to my sewing corner. I'm Carrie of A J Knight Sews, and today, or at least in this video, I'm going to share with you my adventures in making a history-bounding, Regency-inspired fossil collecting outfit. My friend Bonnie found this sea life fabric and immediately thought of me, probably because of the presentation I gave for the virtual Jane Austen Festival this summer, which was put on by the same people that put on the Jane Austen Festival in Louisville, Kentucky at Locust Grove, except this time it was virtual, so people all over the place could join without having to travel to the humid and hot Hades that is Louisville in July. But that presentation was on Lyme Regis, which is the one of the settings, and I think the most important setting, of Austen's novel Persuasion. It's also an important paleontological site because Mary Anning lived there. If you don't know who Mary Anning is, she's a paleontologist who lived and worked in Lyme Regis. She wasn't necessarily recognized as a paleontologist because she was doing her work in the early to mid 19th century. I think she died in 1847 of breast cancer. But while she was alive and doing her geological and paleontological work, the men of the Royal London Society, or the Royal Society of London, did not actually allow her to join their scientific community as a full member, but posthumously she was recognized for all of her hard work. Thanks. But in Lyme Regis, there were lots of paleontological firsts that were found. So in this talk about Persuasion and Lyme Regis, I couldn't resist talking about Mary Anning and fossils, even though the talk was for the Jane Austen Festival. Right now, of course, we can't go to Lyme Regis. I can't go to Lyme Regis because of the pandemic. Yay, 2020, right? Dumpster fire of a year. But I can go to local fossil collecting sites or local rock outcrops to kind of pick around and look for ancient preserved creatures. So I have this fabric, and immediately I thought, yes, send it to me, Bonnie, because I can make some kind of little cute fossil collecting gown, Regency style, but kind of in the vein of Miss Frizzle, because I am, after all, also a geology teacher. And some of the little creatures that are on this fabric kind of look like some of the fossils that I talked about in my Jane Austen presentation. Is that even gonna... Yeah, if I put it in front of my face, it'll focus. Yay! But these are some of my favorite fossils, ammonites, and I love the little spirally shapes, and you can kind of see that in here, although these are probably foraminifera, or tiny single-celled creatures, but that's okay. It still evokes the sea, and most of the fossils that I collect are from the sea, or they were from the sea originally, so I think it works. I only have 4 yards of this fabric, so I knew I couldn't make a full-length gown, and that's okay, because a full-length gown might be difficult to tromp around in the rocks in. So instead I decided to make a shorter gown, and I'm not sure how short yet, but here are some of my drawings that I did using various Regency patterns that I have, mostly Laughing Moon, fig leaf patterns. Yeah, that's about it. But then I remembered that I have this pattern 130 from Laughing Moon. And Laughing Moon is one of my favorite pattern companies because it comes with all sorts of historical information about the styles. And view C is this little tunic here. And I know I have enough fabric for that. So I thought, okay, I'll try that. Now I used this pattern in 2017 and I made a mock-up and I couldn't get it right and I gave up. 2017, I was not as into historical costuming as I am now, and if things were too difficult, I just quit. But it's time to try again. I have learned a lot since then, mostly from this amazing community. And so I'm gonna try to make this gown or tunic, and I think I'll have enough fabric to actually have sleeves, which means that I can protect my arms while I'm out there collecting fossils. And as you can see, I'm wearing my stays right now. I have these little Regency soft stays that I made from a Fig Leaf Patterns pattern. I'll put the number down below because I don't remember, 200 something. But Mackenzie of Fig Leaf Patterns had a workshop during the Jane Austen Festival, and I quickly hopped on that boat. And I've actually made 2 of them out of the yard of very wide fabric that came with the kit. This is not very wide fabric, which is why 4 yards is not enough for me to make a full-length gown. But I'm wearing the stays because I'm going to try on the mock-up again from 2017. But I'm also wearing the stays because they help me with my posture while I'm sewing and just living my daily life. This is one reason why I think I might try to go back to wearing stays every day. Not go back to it, but you know, my ancestors wore stays or corsets every day, so maybe I'll go back to what my ancestors were doing because it really feels so much more comfortable than a regular bra, and it holds my shoulders back, which helps prevent my upper back problems from aggravating me, especially while sewing, which is a very forward activity. You know, you kind of like use all the stuff in the front, and this sort of hurts the stuff in the back unless you balance it out. But this holds my shoulders back. Also, why do I have back problems? Bad posture. Lots of slouching. Don't slouch, kids. Don't slouch. Therefore, my plan is to make this little gown and then wear it in my everyday life. Maybe while teaching geology, I think that would be fun. And also to go collect fossils. So here we go. Hey, so here's the mock-up. Here's my duct tape double. I haven't named her yet. I'm not sure. Maybe Galena because she is gray and that's a cool mineral. Anyway, the mock-up of the bodice for the gown originally had a skirt that I later cannibalized to make different mock-ups. But the darts are the major problem here. I could not figure out how to make the darts work, and they don't work. They're squishy, there's too much room here. I just sewed them the way that the pattern said to sew them instead of actually fitting them to myself. I learned later from my friend Amy, who is also a costumer in this wonderful community, that you can actually put the bodice on and before you sew the darts, fold the darts over so that they fit you, pin them down obviously very carefully, and then later top stitch them down. I cannot stress enough that there are no dumb questions. You know, I tell my students this all the time. There really are no dumb questions. Just make sure you do a little bit of your own research first. In their case, it's to, you know, do the reading assignments and read the syllabus, please. But in costuming, it usually involves Googling. And once you've done that, if you can't find the answers, then bring it to the larger costuming community. But other than that, I think this fits okay. The back seems to fit pretty well. This is always a problem for me. The shoulders are too wide because I have relatively narrow shoulders. And you can see they're kind of sloping off. It kind of looks like they're doing that on the models in the pattern itself, so maybe that's not a big deal. But I might try to decrease that by sewing the seams for the sleeves, because I think I am going to make some sleeves to go with this little tunic a little bit higher up so that the seam, the shoulder seam, is actually on my shoulder point or a little bit off rather than all the way down here. And the sleeves, I don't really like this style that much, but I think it's because of this fabric. When I first made this gown, I'm like, oh, it looks like scrubs. I did, for my first ever historical costume, make a V-neck tunic dress to go to an SCA event, and I bought the cheapest fabric I could find, and it was kind of a bluish gray, and it looked like scrubs, and somebody even came up to me and said, "Oh, are you a doctor or a nurse? Because you look like you have scrubs on." And after that, I decided that I never wanted to wear or make anything that looked vaguely like scrubs again, because I'm not a doctor. I'm a geologist. Cutting out the pattern pieces for the bodice lining, and then I'll sew the bodice together. While I'm doing that, I'd like to tell you about a few of my 19th century British foremothers in geology who, until recently, have been rather invisible. They certainly don't turn up in most geology textbooks, or any that I'm aware of actually. So I have to bring them to life myself in my classrooms to mitigate their erasure, basically, from the history of science. Geology was a new and trendy science in the early 19th century, and the majority of geologists were, of course, white, male, and rich enough to have the leisure time and finances to travel to sites of geological interests and to present for scientific societies. And women were not warmly welcomed into these societies, as you can imagine, in the early 19th century. But many women did persevere to become geologists and do geology. Science is a verb, y'all. And although their contributions were not always recognized by the men in the field, I want to talk about a couple of these women. So I already mentioned Mary Anning, who had the barriers of being working class and a woman to overcome, making her reputation as an excellent fossilist all the more remarkable, in my opinion. Here's a sketch she made of a fossil she collected, Squaleraja, I think that's how you pronounce it. She made this very detailed sketch in order to try to sell the fossil to the various men who were looking for new fossils to study and present to scientific conferences, which of course was not actually available to her. Her attention to detail and her observational skills in this sketch, and in really all of her sketches and writings even, are evidence that she was actually doing geology. She was doing paleontology. But she rarely left Lyme. The other Marys and the Charlotte I want to talk about all traveled with their husbands and assisted in geological fieldwork by collecting fossil and rock specimens and sketching those specimens, as well as drawing larger outcrops and landscapes or putting them in watercolors, things like that. And then these sketches and watercolors, drawings, etc. were put into books and put into papers, put into letters, and presented at conferences, of course, by the men. So these women really were scientific partners with their husbands, although their names did not appear as such in any of the publications. Charlotte Murchison, the wife of Roderick Impey Murchison, was instrumental in redirecting her husband's attentions from fox hunting and other dissipations to the more intellectual pursuit of geology. Charlotte grew up with a father who was a geology teacher, and she learned from him, and she wanted to do geology. And so I can just imagine her looking at her husband, who's just going out and doing a bunch of fox hunting, and thinking, we need to do something else. Something else that I enjoy. So she collected and curated her own very impressive fossil collection, parts of which were later studied and published by the famous geologist William Buckland. And Charlotte was an accomplished conchologist, or studier of mollusk shells, which sounds like a dream occupation to me, lover of ammonites here. And she was also an artist. Her drawings, including this one of Stackpole Rock, appear in many of her husband's publications and other publications. James de Carl Sowerby named an ammonite fossil after her, Ammonites murchisone. Hashtag goals to get an ammonite named after me. After Charlotte sketched it during a trip to Yorkshire. So Charlotte makes an appearance in the new Mary Anning movie, Ammonite, and is played by Saoirse Ronan, while Mary is played by Kate Winslet. It's historical fiction, of course, so I can't expect, complete accuracy to what we do know of her, but Mary Anning was 11 years younger than Charlotte in real life, so this casting is kind of interesting, just so you know. Maybe they were trying to depict the aging effects of poverty and loss and a life spent on the coast hunting for fossils. I just don't know. Charlotte was also instrumental in getting the famous Charles Lyell, another important geologist who of course appears in textbooks, to open his lectures at King's College to women. She attended the lectures and caused a lot of arguments among the men who were, in charge of that sort of thing, and she and some other women just kept going, and finally they decided to open them to women. All right, moving on to another Mary. This is a silhouette of Mary Buckland, her husband William Buckland, who I mentioned before, and their son Frank, and their fossil collections, which I think is just fabulous. Okay, so here in the video I am pinning the bodice front to the bodice lining, and I'm getting a little bit frustrated because it's not lining up at the edges. But anyway, I want to get a silhouette with some of my fossils at the next Zoom silhouette party that I attend. I mean, I didn't even think about it. Of course I can hold up a fossil. I've held up a book and a teacup and an umbrella or parasol, but I have not held up fossils yet. Okay. So Mary Buckland sketched fossils and other scientific phenomena for the likes of Baron Georges Cuvier, the famous anatomist. Here's a watercolor, of course it's black and white, but this is the landslide of Axmouth that appeared in one of her husband's publications. And she also sketched things for many other people. But sketching requires, and I want to make this clear, she's not just drawing. I know drawing is a female accomplishment, and many of these more educated women had this accomplishment in England. But sketching requires excellent observational skills, which is why I ask my students to make sketches when we go into the field. You are doing geology when you draw a geological object or outcrop or whatever. So snapping a photo is a relatively passive way of taking in details, while drawing is much more active. Just think about Janet Arnold's passion for her books and what went into her books, Patterns of Fashion. And finally, we have Mary Horner Lyell, the wife of Charles Lyell, whose books on geology influenced Charles Darwin's ideas about evolution. Mary Lyell was also a paleontologist and a conchologist, and supplied Darwin with barnacles for his research. She discussed geology and evolution with the men you read about in the textbooks, but she is never mentioned. This is only a tiny fraction of the women geologists of the 19th century, and I want to know, how many have you heard of before today, before listening to me yammer on about them? So let me know in the comments. I always teach about Mary Anning, but this project and my research have really inspired me to up my game and bring more of these women to my students in my future classes. Here I am top stitching the bodice front to the bodice lining. And you can see that the bodice looks okay. It fits pretty well, and I have pinned the darts down. So instead of relying on the markings in the pattern itself, I have pinned down the darts. here I am doing my very unscientific method of trying to trim down the amount of fabric at the shoulders, especially at the top and the front and the back, not necessarily so much at the bottom, in order to get these sleeves to fit me better because of my narrow shoulders. And I just sort of estimated about 1 centimeter or less because I want to be conservative and not do too much trimming away before I attach the sleeves. I have my bodice that's pretty much completed except for trim on my duct tape dress form. Highly recommend having a duct tape dress form party when we can get back together. This was last year, before the pandemic. I hand sewed the darts, and I think they look much better than if I had followed the instructions on the pattern. But I think it fits really well in the back, and now it fits pretty well in the front, except it's really long. And I've found this with a lot of Regency era patterns on me. I have a very short, apparently, shoulder point to under bust measurement. And so I think I'm gonna cut off 1 inch so that the waistband is actually closer to my under bust. Or maybe just 1/2 inch to be conservative, I don't know. But that is ready for the sleeves to be set. I also sewed the sleeves. I didn't actually press them yet. I do not like pressing sleeves because it's almost impossible. If you have any suggestions on how to do that better, please let me know. All right. And as you can see, there was a suggestion to gather this area so that the sleeves are just slightly crooked, like the crook of your arm. The directions said to gather this down to 3 3/4 inches. And I did that, and I tried to secure it, and then I sewed it by machine. And while I did that, they stretched out. I have never been happy with sewing gathered anything on my sewing machine. And if it looks awful after I press it, gather it again and make sure it's actually the correct measurement, and then just sew it by hand. I'm definitely gonna set the sleeves by hand, but I've never been completely happy with sleeves that I've sewn on by machine. So, have I been happy with sleeves I've set on by hand? No. Anyway, sleeves. We'll see how this goes. I'm gonna try to set them by hand and hopefully that'll be better. All right, so I went into the other room to get the other camera battery because my camera battery died, and I forgot that I'm attached to the camera with this microphone, so that was fun. I'm going to set the sleeves in, hopefully one time and one time only, and then I'm going to zigzag stitch all of the skirt panel seams because I don't like raw seams. And I know that zigzag stitch is not necessarily historically accurate, but I'm going for historically inspired, which should be obvious given the sea creature fabric here, instead of historically accurate. So I hope I see you soon. I didn't put the sleeves on yet. Instead, I zigzagged and sewed together all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 skirt panels. And is sleeve anxiety a thing? Because if it is, I think I've got it. And I'm definitely sleevel procrastinating here. I think before I iron this and iron the sleeves, haven't done that either, and then tackle the sleeves and attach them to the bodice, I'm gonna go eat lunch and do that with a full stomach. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. Also, eating lunch will help me delay. Now I am basting the sleeves with a red thread to make sure that they are where I want them to be before I spend all that time hand back stitching them together. And when I do start back stitching them, I want to make sure I did it right. And apparently I did, because it looks okay. And the back stitching, back stitching, back stitching. My stitches are not as tiny as I would like them to be, and that is clear in this next clip when I check to see how much space there is between the stitches. for elastic chest. What are you doing? Is that your spot today? Alright, I've skipped filming several steps because you don't want to watch me zigzag stitch for several miles. But here we've got the gown and I kind of love it. I think it's really cute. There is some awkwardness here at the waist seam and I'm hoping that goes away when I press it and finish the inside, because as you can see I haven't done that yet. And I'm also going to still need to, of course, hem the bottom. Hello, Stinkerbell. And I finished the sleeves and I like them. I think they're cute. They may be too hot for fall in the southernmost portion of the Midwest where I am. And I'm thinking about actually slicing these off, putting binding to make a shorter top sleeve, and then a binding at the top of the long sleeve part, and then kind of basting them together so that it's actually a detachable sleeve and I can have a short sleeve and a long sleeve if I want. But for right now, I'm just gonna leave that. And I'm also wondering if I should put facing on the back of the skirt at the bottom, because as you can see, it's got that kind of awkward quilting cotton look on the underside. And I don't know if that'll be a big deal when I've hemmed it or not. So I might also do that. I'm probably gonna wear this with leggings or shorts or maybe, skinny jeans, just because if I want to tromp around on rocks, I think that would be more appropriate. But I think it would also be cool to wear this just as a dress. Except that because this is the tunic version, the overlap, you know, there is overlap, but I'm going to have to try it on once I've fixed the waistline and see if it's comfortable. And if I sit down, is it going to do weird things? Of course, I'm not going to be sitting down while I wear it in front of other people, mostly just in my office. If I'm teaching, I will be standing and walking around. But if I'm out on an outcrop, I think having pants on underneath would be useful. And then I need to put some trim on this thing. There is trim on the pattern, as you can see right here on the tunic part. And I have gobs and gobs and gobs of this grosgrain ribbon that I got that kind of matches. It's a close color blue and it evokes sea foam, sea colors. So I think I'm going to put that all along where they do in the example, and maybe even at the cuffs. I'm not sure, but that is the plan. I forgot to show the back, which is part of my favorite part. I think that putting the trim on will help to kind of break up this pattern of the tiny sea creatures. I also think that I might need to put pockets in this, and I can't believe I didn't think about that earlier. But I am thinking that I am going to need to slice open the seams and strategic spots between the gown front and the skirt front and the side and try to put in pockets. What are you doing? What are you doing? I put all their cat toys in another room and they've brought several of them in there, including the snake. What did you find? Oh, a marble. Good job. Good job. Anyway, yeah, pockets. I'm going to go watch several YouTubes and see if I can figure that out. And if it's reasonable, I really think I'm going to need pockets to put fossils and rocks in and, you know, maybe my phone or something like that. So, yeah. Here I am whip stitching the lining to the skirt. And now I am hemming the skirt. Yay! This is usually close to the last step, or it feels like the last step, even if you have a bunch of closures and other things to put on the dress. But it's always such a good feeling. However, after this, I will put on about 25 yards of trim. When I first started putting on this trim, I tried to eyeball it to make the little box pleats that I then kind of twisted. but the grosgrain has these nice little ridges, and so I can actually just count. And there are about 10 on the front of the box pleat, and then of course 5 to go back, and then 5 to go back the other way. But hopefully you get a sense of how I folded these into the box pleats. I just counted 5 little ridges or 10 little ridges each time for each fold. And this went on for quite a while. I would fold a little bit and then I would actually sew a little bit. So I didn't fold the whole thing and then sew it, because I had no idea that I would use almost the entire spool. Spoiler alert. And I hand sewed the entire thing to give myself more control. I know this is a historybounding outfit, but I didn't have any thread that... Can you hear the cat scratching the back of my chair? I didn't have enough thread of the same color to use a machine stitch to stitch it down, and I think it also just looks nicer with the tiny little hand stitches. So yes, I hand sewed, after all that machine sewing, I hand sewed almost 25 yards of this grosgrain ribbon onto my dress. The trim on the hem is done. Goes all the way down that front panel and around. Hello, Stinkerbell. Oh, hello, Rascal. And Emma. All right, anyway, all the way around. They think I'm gonna give them a cat treat or something. All the way around. And there we go. I have enough of this grosgrain ribbon left. Yay! That I'm actually going to just go around the waist as well, and then do something around the end of the sleeves. I think it'll help make the color pop a little bit better. And that'll be it for the trim. And then the last step will be to rip out some of the side seams and put in pockets. Something's happening here. What's going on? Hi, Susan. Okay, here we go. I used Bernadette Banner's video on making pockets in various skirts. I think she put them in 1 or 2 skirts in the video, and I'll link that video down below for you. But basically, you find your side seam, and after drawing or sketching out, tracing out rather, your pocket pattern, you do some seam ripping, seam ripping, and then you put the pockets in, you stitch them on each side. I actually also zigzag stitched around the outside of the pockets themselves after I sewed them together, the 2 sides together, so that there would not be any, or as much rather, shredding of this lovely quilter's cotton that I am making a gown out of here. Pin, 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 pin. And you gotta make sure that the way that you pin the pocket pieces, alliteration, leaves it so when you do turn the pocket so that it goes to the inside of the dress, that you see the fashion side or the right side of the fabric. Okay, so that's what I'm checking here to make sure that's gonna work. And then I'm sewing it on. Do that to both sides. And then I am just sewing the 2 pocket pieces together. And I'm not sure why I did not put my sewing machine on the level. That really helps when you're sewing. Pro tip. But yeah, it's because of the little cutting boards below it. I have them stacked awkwardly from something I was doing previously. So that's why it's rocking back and forth. It's not my sewing machine. It's fine. Okay, but I'm super excited to have pockets in this dress. Now that the trim is all on, I'm thinking maybe I want a second row of trim down here at the, there's your stretching Tinkerbell. down here at the bottom of the skirt and also here at the sleeves, and figure out if I have enough of the ribbon left. Not going to focus, are you? I need to measure the length I want to put the trim on, and then multiply that by 3, because each of these oh goodness, what's the matter? Yeah? Does you need a belly rub? You got your snake? We go. You can see each of them goes 1, 2, 3. And I've got a little bit of the ribbon left, so I'm gonna see if I can do that. It turns out that I need 252 inches of this grosgrain ribbon. Grosgrain, whatever. And I measured this out with the help of my cats, and I have 256 inches of this ribbon. And that apparently means the sewing gods are telling me, yes, you need another row of trim at the bottom of this skirt. And I'm not going to disobey them this time. And that is what I'm going to do. It is finally time to put on the dress and actually go outside and see how it goes walking around in it. I did not put any closures on this gown because so many Regency gowns were closed using pins, and I kind of like how I can go back and forth between having the stripe down the skirt of the trim or not. Okay, so that was an example of it not being there, and I'm going to pin it so that you actually do have the stripe going down the front of the skirt. I'm using 2 pins, one for each corner. My plan is to use this gown in several different ways. One of them, like I said, was with skinny jeans, which I've got on here, and cute little flats. This is quilting cotton though, and so it kind of sticks to the back, so I might end up wearing a slip or something, or putting a silky facing on the inside of the skirt. And the pockets are kind of at a lower angle than I'm used to, or a lower level than I'm used to, but they still work. I can still get my hands in there comfortably, and I can fit a mineral in there. But I can also fit my phone in there, as you can see, as I'm checking it. And the wind is kind of blowing stuff around. I might need to put some sort of snap or something to keep the front flap from flapping, because I also want to wear this just as a cute little dress without leggings, especially when it's warmer out. Here I am testing to see that I can bend over to pick up rocks and pet the dog, of course. But my favorite, my absolute favorite, is actually wearing this with a total Regency ensemble. The stays, petticoats, and the more petticoats the better. I've only got 1 on here, try on 3 later, and it works even better. But I'm off to go collect some fossils. So thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more of this type of video, please subscribe to my channel and let me know in the comments if you've ever done a history-bounding outfit, what era, and what you would like to do as far as historical costuming in the future. Thank you. Also, I like how I get kind of a little air bustle with the wind in this outfit. Time to go find some ammonite.